Hello, everyone, and welcome to VG.Cantina.Podcast, the video game podcast. I am your host, M, and sorry about missing Sunday's podcast. I was kind of taking a little bit of a break. The main topic of today's podcast actually kind of concerns that. But first, let's go ahead and go into some news real quick. I think I'm kind of liking this format that I came up with, where I talk real quick about the news, then go into a major subject to talk about in the podcast. So that means the news shouldn't be taking up the majority of the podcast, and it will actually just be some random thoughts that I have that I want to talk about at that moment. But let's get straight into it. First quick bit of news, let's talk about Super Mario 64. Great game, revolutionized 3D gaming in general, and terrible camera controls. But not going to be talking about any of that stuff. We're actually going to be talking about the price of it. And that is the price of $1.5 million. Yes, we have a sealed, I believe, copy of Super Mario 64 that is graded at a 9.8 and was sold for $1.5 million, making it the most ever paid game to date. And that seems kind of weird to me. I mean, I know a lot of games get kind of, I collect games, so I'm aware about the pricings and whatnot. And I understand some games go up and up. But it just seems weird when certain games just become super astronomically high. Like, I just went to to my local game shop. And I was just kind of browsing around, and they had a copy of Super Mario 64. Obviously, it wasn't boxed and it wasn't sealed, but it was for about, I think, maybe like $90 or something, maybe $100. And just the discrepancy between those two and this one is just so bizarre to me, especially since a lot of times these games are meant to be played, or there's things inside of the game box that kind of really add to what it is, because it's not like, I get comic books are like sealed and whatnot, and they're really meant to open, but at least the artwork on front, kind of like, at least isn't as bad to feel when you lock it up, or like cards like Magic or Pokemon. You're not essentially playing them; they're more for artwork and collectability. But with games, there's a lot of things inside of the box that just, I think, outweigh much more the outside, or just kind of keeping it in like a preserved state. I understand, it's sealed, it's in almost perfect condition, so that might attribute that. But I wonder what's the next game that's going to sell for super high that is just sealed and protected. Because Super Mario 64 was a revolutionary game, so I guess it would depend on the type of game. Like maybe Halo Combat Evolved, like maybe there's a sealed copy of there somewhere, and it's perfectly preserved or whatever. Maybe that's the next game, because Halo revolutionized the first person shooter, or the modern first person shooter. I think Doom or Wolfenstein was the ones that essentially created the genre. So maybe there's sealed copies of those somewhere else where that will eventually become that large price. But $1.5 million got sold. Sorry guys, you missed your chance. Total bargain. But let's go on into the next news, and this news makes me pretty sad because I was pretty excited for this. I was excited for how the franchise was essentially going to go, and that is concerning Judgment. So if you guys don't know, it looks like Judgment, the series itself, might be essentially closing. It looks like Lost Judgment might be the last of its series, and this is most likely due between, I believe, the actor that plays the main character. The actor's name is Takuya Kimura. And he essentially comes from a talent agency that employs male actors, I believe. And for whatever reason, this agency has extremely strict policies of their actors, I guess, appearing on the internet or maybe on the PC or something. And it's just, and I guess they just don't want to play ball. And it's really saddening to me for two reasons. First reason, I I was almost in love with how the Yakuza series was gonna go, because it seems like they're sticking for the main game to have the Yakuza series, the mainline Yakuza series, go into an RPG format. I loved Like a Dragon and its RPG elements. It was a fantastic game, super fun, super funny, and even had serious moments that were even great. And then they had Judgment, which they only had one game put out, but with the second one, they kind of confirmed that Judgment would stay the way of the kind of like the action game, where you just mash and press buttons and just fight people and whatnot. And I really liked how that direction was going, because I think both series were really great, and they captured what it means. Both of them captured what it means to be a Yakuza game. Since Like a Dragon is going a different direction with its main character, and Judgment is essentially a side story spin-off that I guess became its own thing, which is great. But hopefully Sega can kind of talk with this agency and figure out something to do with it, because I really, really, really don't want the series to die. I mean, just so much potential for the Yakuza series as a whole, just completely stopped by this almost archaic decision from this talent or agency or whatever. Which goes into the second thing I'm talking about, is I can't wrap my head around what's going on with Japan on certain things with the internet. Like I'm sure, as most of you probably know, Japan has a really just dense and heavy influence with technology type things. Like, I don't know if it's because of their how their society is over there. Like they have a lot of really cool things or services that you don't find anywhere else or whatever, because their infrastructure is so well built, and they're really into adapting a lot of technology type of things, like with most Eastern nations like Korea or China, where they're kind of pushing ahead with that. But Japan, I think, is just the most popular, because they also produce a lot of entertainment that also takes advantages of that thing, and also they have certain things of entertainment that only kind of works over there because of their infrastructure that we don't get to we don't get to have, because why would we have great infrastructure here with anything? But besides all that, there are a lot of companies over there, and I'm specifically kind of just focusing on video games. I don't know how a lot of their other things go, that just have these weird kind of things going on, like this acting agency. Like, why in the 21st century, 2021, you're not a part of the internet landscape? Like, why? The way to get so much money and so much exposure and views with your talent or whatnot is the internet by far. Not just reaching millions and millions of people in almost a second, and you refuse to do that, or refuse to let your actors or employees or whatever do that. And it's just really weird. And then you have Nintendo with their online infrastructure, where it's just their online is basically horrendous. There certain things, maybe it's not a part of this problem, maybe it's just Nintendo, or maybe it's just all that kind of things. But also, I mean, just recently when we were talking about the Switch OLED, where the big feature was, now it has an Ethernet port connected, something that the old Xbox had way back when. Like, that's not a feature. That's something that you should have done, and it just shows how, I don't want to say incompetent, because that sounds really harsh, but just how just almost numbingly unaware you are of certain things, even though you're a game company and a technology company as well. Just how, like, where does that division, or like, where does that divide come from? Like, what is that? Another thing is also, a lot of these fighting game companies, or fighting game studios or whatever, in the Japanese scene, whatever, like, say, Street Fighter with Capcom, or Tekken, maybe even Arc System Works, all that kind of thing, where their online is just really not great for the fighting games that they make, even though there's already a solution for it, and people have implemented it into those games via mods or whatever, and it just shows the game running amazingly with people online all over the world, But they continue and continue and continue to refuse it, or they acknowledge it and then refuse it later on, and just say, "Oh, well, their ways of doing it is way better," even though it's very clearly not, or only very clearly works in Japan. Which, I mean, you're not just selling to Japan; you're selling to the entirety of the world, especially with how niche fighting games are. You want to reach as broad of an audience as possible, and if the majority of your audience is wanting these things to better play with themselves and increase the player size, why aren't you doing these things? And it just comes to my head where, like, why are these companies, why are these studios making such bad decisions, or not even making decisions at all with these sort of things that we see now that work, that are proven, or like that have been implemented a long time ago. Like, why are they so slow, and why are they just so bad at these things? And maybe there's an article or something somewhere that explains this kind of things, but as far as I know, it just keeps happening. It just keeps being more confusing. It just keeps being sad, and I don't think it's ever going to stop, and it's just going to continue and continue and continue to confuse me, because the problem itself is kind of like, the problem is the same all throughout. They're not willing to do certain things that are modern, even though each of these things that I mentioned are different, whether it's online infrastructure, or how to implement online matches, or whatever. And I know they sound kind of similar, but I'm not really great at differentiating them, even though I know they're different. Or with policies regarding the internet, even though your main export is these people that should be used as exposure as your own material or whatever. I don't know. It's just something that I've kind of always been bewildered by and whatnot. It's only I don't even think time will tell, because I'm pretty sure this will go on forever and ever until 20 years from now we have new technology and Japan is finally on board with the old one. It's like, oh, hey, look, man, this is great. We finally did it. I was like, yeah, but that was 10 years ago. All right. Last piece of topic before we get into our main meat of this podcast is there is a documentary by NoClip about the Blue Point Game Studios game Demon Souls. And I have watched it. And just like all their other documentaries with NoClip, it is phenomenal. It is amazing. If you have any interest in, the gaming world concerning like how games are made, or just like kind of the thought process of certain things like I am, this is a must watch, because it's super interesting. And it's really interesting in terms of like, how to tackle a remaster or remake of a game, because, it's essentially different than creating a game yourself, because you have just so much pressure into making the game, be memorable and correct to its loyal fan base, while still making it essentially modern, which is what they did. And it's just interesting to see, what they did and what they had to do and what they were given, and these choices and whatnot, and, just all that kind of, tender love and care they had for this franchise. So that it's a very high recommend for me. Love what they do. I'm curious what their next special doc is going to be. Whatever it is, I will most likely watch it. And they didn't have any cool thing at the end of the doc though, which is a complaint, I guess. What's the next thing that Blue Point's working on? It's been rumored. Is it a Metal Gear game? Is it the Bloodborne? Is it Legend of Dragoon? They didn't give us anything. So if you're expecting any of that, I have some disappointing news. But other than that, I mean, obviously it's a joke. They're not gonna spoil anything. But yeah, game's great, or the documentary is great. Must watch. It's like an hour or so long. Just absolutely phenomenal. Super educational and all that kind of stuff. And with that, the news is done, which means we must now get into the main portion of this show, the real fajitas, coming to you from the Cantina, and that is, what did I do during these past 2 days, because I took the day off. And that is failing at my sobriety of a certain game. And if you've been listening to other podcasts, you probably know what game I'm talking about, and that is League of Legends. Yes, I caved. Yes, I played. Yes, I hated it, and I hated myself. But there is more to the story. So essentially, Sunday, for whatever reason, I had just this really, really, really deep itch of wanting to play. I watch Pro League of Legends as well, and that doesn't seem to be why I have this need to go back. I mean, I've gone days without playing League, but watching Pro League, and not feeling it. But then there are days where I don't even watch Pro League, or just Pro League's off, and then all of a sudden I have this itch to play, and I did, and I played rank, and I lost like 4 games in a row. All of them were terrible, just absolute stomps. Nothing I could do about it. 3 games I was doing well, or not 3 games, 2 games I was doing well, but my team decided to int. 1 game I was doing really well, and then this one guy just decided to proceed to int. And then 1 game I just got super stomped. And that just feels super, super bad. And I was, as I sat there looking at the lost screen, I was kind of thinking, man, telling myself this every single time, which is, I gotta stop. This game is terrible, even though I like it. It's bad for me. So I kind of just went online, looking around, just some forums, and I came across this Reddit post, which I don't kind of have on me. It was just something that I kind of glanced at before I went to bed, which is the same guy that had the same problem that I have, where he hates playing League, but just can't stop, and just asking for suggestions of what to do, and like maybe there's something similar that you can go to scratch that itch and not have to play League. And just being someone that really empathized, I kind of looked, I took a real interest into this post and looked through the comments, and then there was this one guy that kind of explained some things, and just kind of had some ways to kind of curb that need to play League that I have implemented. And the first thing is to just play League, but instead of playing ranked, play like the unranked or play ARAM. And I was kind of thinking about it because I tried that before, but I just didn't get the itch out because I want to play ranked. I want to play skilled, or quote unquote skilled players of my level, and kind of just do a little more. And my thought process is, well, if these unranked games, nobody's really going to care. It's not going to be great. But I went ahead and tried it again. And just like I thought, there are games where people just don't even connect, or people just don't even care, or people either just kind of fool around or mess around in it. And I don't like that. I like when the game is actually played and properly played and whatnot, and you get that more in ranked. But I wasn't feeling terrible because I knew it didn't matter. It was just playing the game. I felt bad that I wasn't able to play the game, quote unquote, properly, but I felt some joy. And then playing some more and more, I started getting more and more of those games where, yeah, the games are being played more properly. The enemy team is playing how they should. My team is playing how we should. Sure, there's some pretty bad losses, but as it goes, we were playing proper League. And that's when it finally kind of the itch itself was subsiding, and I wasn't feeling as bad when I was losing, and I kind of felt great when I was winning. When before, during ranked, when I lost, it felt terrible, and when I won, it didn't feel like anything, because there's that system where you go up, and it doesn't matter how many times you win. If you constantly lose, you just go down, and you kind of stay in place and you get stuck. So I went ahead and tried that out, and I feel like that's working for me. Another thing that he mentioned was play Runeterra, which is Riot's card game based on League of Legends. And I went ahead and downloaded it. It's free to play. I was worried because I don't like those card games that are free to play, because it always feels like you have to spend a ton of money. And I remember way back when I was really into Hearthstone, I didn't spend a lot of money, but then there was that point where I got that itch, that itch when you're really playing. And then this new expansion came out that I was a part of, which was the Ice King, and I caved, and I spent like $50 or $60 to pre-order to get all those packs. Got all those packs, played it, had a really good time, really good time. It was really fun. But then when the next tech came in, and things kind of got taken away or moved, or I didn't want to spend another $60 on just cards, and I just started losing, and it just didn't feel great. I just kind of, luckily I was able to pull off of that because I didn't really have any attachment to like WoW or anything, so I didn't feel too bad, leaving that. But I still kind of missed the card game aspect of it, and I played other card games like I think Shadowverse and whatnot, but nothing ever scratched that itch. Tried playing Magic and going to a local Magic shop and trying to learn Magic. Didn't really work out. I wasn't too into it. But with this really feels like it feels like a good game, like Magic. Like even though I didn't stick with Magic, I kind of saw the appeal of it. I was like, yeah, that's something that I feel like obviously people could get into. I understand why people got into it. I didn't get into it for reasons that I kind of can't tell, but didn't, maybe I just wasn't attached to Magic as a whole. And with Runeterra, I had that gameplay where I knew it was good and it kind of felt good, but it had that allure of Hearthstone where I kind of know these things. I like the art style, direction of it. I really like a lot of the mechanics of it. And it just married the two. And when I was playing, I was really liking it, but I was worried like, oh my god, how much, I looked and a lot of, I guess, sets came out for the game because it's been out for a little bit. But it is extremely generous to the free to play player, almost too generous even. You get cards and a way to get cards left and right. There's no actual opening of packs. You just choose the card you want and you can get it. Whether it's by, blank tokens that get that specific rarity of card, or dust that, you pay for that card through dust, which is a free currency that you can't buy. And the level of rarity determines how much dust you pay. And I was getting cards left and right, and I was able to build decks that were competitive, or good, and were fun to play, and it was really great. And it that really scratched the itch of League, where the gameplay was solid. It was really addicting and fun to play. I knew the characters, I knew the lore, and it really grabbed me. And it's extremely generous to the free to play player. I even think I didn't look too much into it, but I thought I heard that they actually limit how much you can actually buy in a week. So even if you wanted to pay a whole bunch of money to get a whole bunch of cards, as from what I heard, there's an actual hard stop. And really, a lot of the money that comes through that game is through cosmetics, which, I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, how do you sell cosmetics in essentially a card game? And essentially, it's cosmetics that change the board. So if you played Hearthstone, and you know how there's different boards in Runeterra, they have that rectangular, kind of like mats, like in Magic. Whenever you see someone play Magic, they have a mat. Each player has their own mat where they put all their things, and you can buy different skins for your mat, so it looks different. They also have little mascots on the side, which don't really do anything. They're kind of like heroes from Hearthstone, but instead of actually being an archetype for the deck, they're just kind of like a mascot that's there, and you can buy different mascots and do whatever, and they kind of emote and are animated when certain things happen, or when you win, or when you lose, or whatnot, or when you like actually emote, and they kind of do stuff. So you can get different ones of that. They also have, I think, like backs to the cards that you can pay to have different. I think they have a paid currency, like a premium currency that I don't think buys cards, but makes cards holographic, which I think is also cool because if you don't buy packs, and there's holographic cards, how do you get the holographic cards? Oh, well, you just pay for it, which is purely cosmetic because it doesn't do anything. It just makes them animated, I think. Again, I really haven't been looking into the shop because I don't plan on paying for anything, but I can see if you get really into it and you just want to spend like a couple dollars on a certain cosmetic, why not? Kind of like the Fortnite approach where the game is the game, but the cosmetics is something if you want, because if you play it a whole bunch and you want to look a little different, or if you're tired of how certain things look and you can change it up, why not? So that's been really great, and that has really, I think that really is going to help not rehab me of League, because I'll probably still play, but really kind of make it healthier for me, because I always felt like my body was dying inside whenever I would play League, even though I I wanted to play League, and it just kind of felt like a self-defeating prophecy where I just, I don't want to play, but there's nothing that scratches that itch, so I play, but then I die inside, and then I don't want to play anymore, and then it just goes over and over. But with this, it feels like I can really curve it out, and maybe hopefully, phase it out entirely, because, or at least the MOBA version, because I still think I want to continue to play the card version because I don't feel any anger or attachment to it, and there's a lot of modes, or a good amount of modes to play differently, where I can see myself just kind of going in and out and playing it, but phasing out the MOBA side of it, because when I do play League, I play it for quite some time, and I feel like that's better suited time for me to play different games. Since now I'm kind of wanting to make this podcast and trying to make more games, it's kind of detrimental if I play, 3 hours of League and 1 hour of a different game. Kind of just like with this podcast, where I really wasn't playing a lot of games. I was just playing League or playing Runeterra, which is kind of why I don't have any other games to talk about except for my experiences with this League game. And I think that that's gonna be my plan. I'm probably not gonna try and play League for this week at least. I might play a little bit. Maybe I'll see you. Don't you hear me? I say I don't want to do it, but then I'm like, well, maybe if I do it a little bit, maybe just a little bit, just take a little hit. No, I think maybe I probably will play this time some week. It's not to say like I'm planning to, but like I feel like at some point I'm gonna want to play it, and I'm gonna try and limit that just to one day and focus more on games. So tomorrow you'll hear me talk about something else. But yeah, that's what I did for those past 2 days, and why it's so hard to kind of like continue on with the podcast, which was, what am I supposed to talk about? All I have is League. I'm not good enough to provide any insight, nor do I have any extensive knowledge of it to kind of talk in depth with it. I just know surface level. Oh, these are these champions. These are where they're from. These are kind of like what they deal with each other. Very surface level, so nothing in depth to talk about except for my experiences with it. Probably maybe help you if you have that kind of experience, because with a lot of people that I've seen that either talk about it or kind of hover around League, there's always people that like either like are thinking about getting in but always get pushed back, not because the game's bad, but because if you get sucked in, you get sucked in, and it's not great, and you might spend weeks of your time playing it, and it could just completely destroy you. Obviously, that a lot of that might be hyperbole, but if I had to recommend League, I really wouldn't. But if you you're not a person that is big in MOBAs, or you're a person that will could easily just forget about this game, if you want to give it a try, I would say give it like a quick one-off. But if you're interested in looking for a MOBA, I wouldn't recommend it. Granted, you're probably already playing MOBA because it's the most popular MOBA. Either that or Dota 2, but I never really got into Dota 2. It felt like a little too much for me. And that is my League talk for today. Like I said, I really wasn't playing a lot of other games. There was some, there's some school stuff that I'm doing, so I couldn't really get into it. I guess there was one kind of thing that I was thinking about as well, and that was concerning the Mario 64 thing that we had talked earlier in this podcast about pricing, and it kind of just makes me wonder, and to a point, concerning games currently, is there going to be a crash in games? Because like, when I mean crash, I mean like, is there going to be a point where it just kind of gets too big and it just breaks into itself? Because games currently are pretty expensive to make. They are slowly getting more expensive, and obviously there are like certain things that kind of go into making it less cheap, like Game Pass or like services or whatnot. But that could lead us down a path where that's the only option, and you only have digital versions of games. You don't have physical version of games, so at any point they can just disappear, and there's really nothing you can do about it. But with physical, which I do prefer, is there going to be a time where like a lot of these big studios are just going to collapse in on themselves because either it gets too big and they're not willing to scale back down and make lesser, quote unquote quality games, and cut the cost down, or are they just going to try and milk it as much as possible? And maybe that'll give rise to indie devs. Obviously, I don't want to make this the entire conversation of this podcast. I mostly wanted to focus on League, but that was just kind of a secondary thought. I'll probably talk about that in the next podcast much more in depth. If not, look just for another game. But I want to thank you guys so much for coming in. Like I said, I'm really sorry that I missed Sunday's podcast. I was kind of doing some stuff, and I really wasn't able to do it, or the time that I was going to do it, it was going to be super late, and it just didn't feel right to just kind of ham fist it. But definitely, we'll be back tomorrow. I do try and do podcasts every single day. Depending how next Sunday comes up, I'm going to try and do a podcast at that time. But if I don't, maybe I'll just make Sunday my off day, just to see how that feels. But in the end, this is a video game podcast. One thing we talk about video games. We talk about video games every single day. And that means we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy your night. Or morning.